Hello, it's Jazz at Red Panda Reads, and today I'm going to talk to you about all the books that I read and listened to in the month of August. And I'm super excited because a lot of these books I really enjoyed and I gave a few 5 stars on Goodreads, and I'm excited to share them with you. I also want to say thank you for all the comments and support that I've had for my all my other videos. It's been really lovely to see kind of people who share my passion for books and reading, and it's just brought a smile to my face, so thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with the fantasy books I read during August, and the first of those is The Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. I read the first Robin Hobb book in this series, the Flatshare trilogy, called The Assassin's Apprentice, a couple of months back, and I really enjoyed it. It follows a young boy called Fitz who is born out of wedlock to a prince and ends up being kind of shunned by society for being a bastard. However, the king, his grandfather, does take him under his wing and says, "I'll give you protection, but I am going to train you to be an assassin." And the books follow his character and his kind of, I guess, role within the kingdom, and both as a royal bastard and as an assassin. He's also got this really cool ability where he is able to form bonds with animals. I don't know about you, but if I had any superpower, it would be just to turn into any animal I wanted at kind of the click of a finger. It's not quite that, but he still has these really cool animal bonds and the kind of able to communicate with them, and I really enjoy that aspect of the book. So The Royal Assassin, being the second of the series, follows on straight from where the first book ends, and again I really enjoyed the political intrigue and deceit within this book. However, the romance plot was somewhat questionable. I really disliked it. I really struggled reading a lot of this book because of the romance plot, and I would have been a lot happier if they'd just got rid of it, because it was only near the end when it's kind of dissolved, so the last quarter, that I was again completely consuming this book because I loved it again. So that was a real disappointment. And the things that annoyed me about the romance plot was first the inability for Fitz to communicate with his love interest. It felt very much that he was this kind of lusty, starstruck young individual who is basically head over heels and unrealistically in love with the woman because he likes the idea of being in love rather than actually being in love. I just wasn't convinced by his love for her or her love for him. I hated how they just couldn't communicate their feelings. Throughout the book he's saying, "Oh, I can't lie to her anymore, but I can't tell her the truth either. Oh, because I'm an assassin." And these kind of inner thought montages where he just doesn't know what to do, I just found really dry and dreary, and I just thought it ended up with him not treating her very well. The thing that also annoyed me the most was that he didn't even consider the fact that he could get her pregnant till they've been happily having sex with each other for like weeks and months and for a long time. I feel with contraception there should be equal involvement between the men and the women within a relationship. Yes, maybe the man won't be personally taking the contraception, but he should be aware of the effects it can have on his partner. Unfortunately, the love interest is taking herbs to make sure she won't get pregnant, but just almost, I guess, Fitz's complete inability to consider this as a consequence for his actions really frustrated me, and I think he should have been more considerate about contraception and his love interest. Let me know if you've read this one, your thoughts of it compared to the first one, and also whether I should be excited for the next book. I'm really hoping it gets better. So, yeah. So the next fantasy books I listened to, were Nevermoor and Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend, and I absolutely absolutely loved them. I gave both a 5-star rating. I gave the second, I'd say the second is even better than the first, so 5++ stars. And I'm super excited for more of her writing, and I know her next book is coming out in November and I cannot wait. It's really fantastic to find a series again that you love and you know that there's going to be books out about it for the foreseeable future, and so that's exciting. So it's middle grade fantasy. It follows a young girl called Morrigan Crow who is brought up in a family being told that she's cursed and therefore she is treated really badly, and in the beginning of the book she is whisked away to the city of Nevermoor by a very eccentric hotel manager who says, I'm going to be your guardian and I'm going to help you get through some trials to get a place in the Wanderer Society in order to kind of have a good education. And so the first book follows Morrigan as she undergoes the trials in order to get into this society, and then the second book carries on from where the first one finishes. And it's absolutely beautiful. The images it creates in my mind are mesmerising. The Hotel Deucalion, where Morrigan ends up living, is full of kind of surprises wherever you go. So her room, for example, changes depending on her mood, and so one day she'll have a more kind of simplistic bed, the next day she'll have kind of a nest full of fluffy cushions if she's feeling like being particularly cozy, which is really lovely. It's full of really interesting rooms, for example one where you can create shadow puppets which then become animated across the room, another one where you get different smells which kind of suit the mood, so they kind of mirror the mood of the place. Always, most of the time, very nice smells. Then there's also really lovely guests at the hotel as well. So there's a woman with a beautiful voice, so if she sings, loads of woodland creatures come to see her, so I guess a bit like a Snow White, but really cool. And it's just a wonderful book, and it's got some really sinister moments to it as well as some really kind of funny and just beautiful moments. I love all the characters. I love Jupiter, who is the her guardian, so the hotel manager, and it's just a book that makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside and really happy. So I'd really recommend those books. I think Jessica Townsend has created a wonderful world for us to get lost in, and I would really recommend those. Another fantastic children's book I read this month was A Kind of Spark by Elle McNicoll. I've actually done a review, I'll put the link below, of this book because I thought it was a triumph. It follows a young 11-year-old girl named Addie who's just started a new term at school, and she finds out about women who are being accused of being witches and then burnt because of it. And in her village in particular, a high number of women were accused of being witches and killed. So Addie goes to the village council and says, I want to put up a plaque to remember these women. And Addie is autistic, and it follows her journey as she tries to put a plaque up to remember these women. And it's such a moving, fantastic book. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. And this book follows a woman named Mary Jekyll on her quest to investigate the death and life of her father, Dr. Jekyll, and also the murders of a number of women in the streets of Victorian London. And what I loved about this book is it basically follows a number of women, starting with Mary Jekyll, whose lives are somehow entangled or were affected by famous men in classic literature. For example, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein, and it's wonderful because within many of these books classically, the women don't really get a voice. So for example, in Miss Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there's basically no references to women within the book. They don't really play a role. So to have a book set in the same time era and to see how they responded because of how these men acted in those other pieces of fiction is really wonderful. And all the characters are really lovely. You've also got Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson who help with the murder case, and they don't outshine the women, but they complement them really well. And it's a really enjoyable bit of literature, and I know there's more in the series that I'd definitely consider listening to or reading at a later date. So the next book which I read was Procession of the Dead by D.B. Shan. So this was on my TBR that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to read it because, as I mentioned on my TBR, I love Darren Shan's, which is a pseudonym for D.B. Shan. I love his children books, especially the vampire series, and they're quite dark and I guess sinister in places, but I love his writing style, so I was really keen to read some of his adult fiction. However, I found this book really weird, and I'm not quite sure if I enjoyed it or not. It basically follows a young man named Capek Raymai who arrives in this place called the City, and he wants to be a gangster, and his kind of highest life ambition is to become the Cardinal, and the Cardinal is the lead gangster within the city who's feared by all and is also, I guess, worshipped by many of the other gangsters who look up to be like him. And Capek Raymai wants to be the equivalent of the Cardinal. He wants to rule the city, he wants to be in charge. That's his aim. And it's a very fast-paced book. Lots happens in a very short amount of time. And I found that throughout the book, his personality kind of seemed to change very quickly. His wants, his dislikes. It was very hard to kind of stay on track on who this person was. I also really didn't like him as a protagonist. He treated people very badly a lot of the time, despite saying that he wanted to be a good person, and that made me a little bit uncomfortable. And when he was nice to people, I almost didn't believe it because of some of the other things he'd done. This book, when I was looking at the kind of genre, it's been compared to fantasy, sci-fi, and also noir. So it's possible that this style of book, this is just kind of a genre of book that may not quite be my cup of tea. The things I did like about it, I liked the kind of fantasy world it was set in. I liked the city. It was a very dark and sinister place. There was this weird fog that came down every now and again with these silent monks who I enjoyed. I found them an interesting kind of spooky addition to the story. There was a love interest that I didn't like the love interest that much, but it did make sense at the end. Initially, I didn't find the love interest believable, but as you read the book, it does make more sense. I enjoyed the scenes with the Cardinal. I found him, an absolute terror, like absolutely insane, but I enjoyed the interactions between him and Capek Raymai. But altogether, I don't think I'll be reading any more in this series. I will consider reading more of Darren Shan's adult books because I loved his kid books so much, but I wasn't really invested in this. If you've read it, let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's just this kind of just the Procession of the Dead, or do you think it's more potentially this genre, this kind of quite dark genre with a very unlikable protagonist, which is the thing that maybe put me off more? Let me know your thoughts. Okay, so I've got 2 books left. Another one that I gave 5 stars, and that was Flatshare by Becky O'Leary. And I have not read a romance book for years, and I absolutely loved this one, and it really surprised me. It follows 2 people called Leon and Tiffy who share a bed yet they have never met because Tiffy works a 9-to-5 job and Leon is a palliative care nurse and works nights, and he goes away on weekends. So they never see each other, but they start, and they've never met, and they start to kind of get to know each other via using post-it notes to communicate. So initially it's just like, oh, I've left some tiffin in the fridge, please help yourself, to, oh, you know, can you please move some of your stuff elsewhere, it's in the way. But they form a relationship through these post-it notes, and it feels so real. I felt their ability to communicate via writing down words to each other was more effective than some of the communication I've read in other books where people are speaking directly to each other. And I loved it because I realised I love books where the kind of romance in it feels really real and they really communicate with each other, because I hate it when it's like one person's got a secret and they just don't tell the other person it, and it means it forms a rift between them and then they become bitter to one another. And this book kind of barely has any of that. It has one moment where one character assumes something, but it's very short lasting and it's resolved, and that made me really, really happy. And I loved both the characters. Tiffy is just a joy. She just makes me feel happy. She's so cheerful. And the book, another thing the book does really well is it explores Tiffy's past relationships, and you as a reader experience Tiffy's journey on realising how toxic her past relationship had been and the emotional abuse she went through. And that was really well done, I think. And I gave it 5 stars. It made me laugh out loud when I was listening to it on the car journey home, brought a smile to my face, and I already really want to read it again. So the last book is a non-fiction book, and that is Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom. And Tressie McMillan Cottom is a sociology professor in America, and she's written a lot of essays and articles about what it's like to be a Black woman in America. She also talks about things such as class inequality, and I really enjoyed her writing style. I found the essays really readable. They were quite short, but she wrote her arguments in a really engaging way and made me question things I hadn't previously thought about. The reason I initially picked up this book was because of, I guess it was because of the Black Lives Matter protests which were happening. I live in Bristol, and we had that momentous and incredible moment where the Colston statue was pulled down, and that should have happened a long time ago, because for those who don't know, Bristol was built on slavery, and Colston was one of the kind of leaders of this era. He put a lot of he became rich because of slavery. He built a lot of Bristol because of that money he had. He's not someone we should kind of say, wow, look what you've achieved, because the way he achieved it was not right. So I'm so happy that statue's been taken down, and I really hope we can get something else there instead to kind of remember what happened to Bristol to make it how it is, and not disguise the bad things that happened. And I decided I wanted to read some fiction, some non-fiction regarding racism, because I am a white British individual. I do not know what it's like if you're a Black person in our society, and therefore I thought it'd be good for me to read some literature surrounding it. And I saw Thick and thought it sounded really interesting, and I found it a really great book to read. It also, as well as talking about racism, it talks about kind of Black women in academia. It discusses body image and the idea of kind of what is beauty, and is it possible to become beautiful if you look a certain way because of what society deems to be the most beautiful, which was very, very interesting. It also talked about kind of racism within the healthcare system, and there's a really moving essay that looks at Tressie Cottom's own experiences during being pregnant, and how she was just how she had a really bad experience and that people weren't taking her seriously. And I did not realise that if you are a black woman, you're 3 times more likely to experience a complication in pregnancy, which could be life-threatening, compared to if you're a white woman. So it was a really good read. If you're looking for some non-fiction, I would recommend this book. It's quite a quick read as well. The essays are quite short, the font's quite big and spaced out as well, but it was a real treasure. So those are the 8 books I read and listened to during August. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books or any other books you think I'd enjoy. I realise I've been dipping in and out of quite a lot of different genres at the moment, but I've just been really enjoying exploring different genres, especially because I've been watching a lot of BookTube, and so it's been great. So, we wish you all a very happy rest of your week, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Bye bye!